There's a chapter called The Second Gilded Age in Paul Krugman's book where he describes the extraordinary rise in wealth and power of the very rich during this era of unregulated greed. Since Ronald Reagan's election in 1980, the top 1% of Americans have seen their incomes increase by 275%. But after accounting for inflation, the typical hourly wage for a worker has increased just $1.23. Big money, as Krugman writes in the book, buys big influence, and that's why the financiers of Wall Street never truly experience regime change, because their cash brings both parties to heel. So the policies that got us where we are today in this big ditch of chronic depression have done little for most, but have been very good to a few at the top. But those at the top are not satisfied with having only most of it. They want it all. And if he were writing his book today, Krugman could find plenty of evidence in the deal that supposedly kept us from going over the fiscal cliff. Behind closed doors, Congress larded it with corporate tax breaks worth tens of billions of dollars. Everything from tax credits for NASCAR racing and the railroads to subsidies for Hollywood, rebates for the rum industry, and loopholes for offshore financing that could help giant multinationals like General Electric avoid billions of dollars in corporate income taxes. Writing in the Washington Examiner, columnist Tim Crony says, many of these expensive giveaways were spawned by a web of lobbyists, donors, and staffers surrounding Democratic Senator Max Baucus of Montana, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. And as we know from the Obamacare fight, Baucus is a connoisseur of revolving door corruption. Pick any one of the special interest tax breaks extended by the Cliff deal, Carney wrote, and you're likely to find a former Baucus aide who lobbied for it on behalf of a large corporation or industry organization. Even the pro-business Wall Street Journal was appalled. They called it a crony capitalist blowout. CEOs and lobbyists were tripping over themselves as they traipsed up and down Pennsylvania Avenue between Congress and the White House, privately protecting their interests as they publicly urge austerity on everyone else. Here's Lloyd Blankfein, CEO and chair of the global investment giant Goldman Sachs, when asked by CBS News' Scott Pelley about how he would reduce the federal deficit.
You're going to have to undoubtedly do something to lower people's expectations, the entitlements, and what people think that they're going to get, because they're not going to get it.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
Some things, and you could go back and you can look at the history of these things, and Social Security wasn't devised to be a system that supported you for a 30-year retirement after a 25-year career. Entitlements have to be slowed down and contained.
Because we can't afford them going forward?
Because we can't afford them.
Yes, but Goldman makes sure their entitlements aren't touched. Here's the story. After 9/11, Congress created tax-exempt Liberty Zone bonds to help small businesses rebuild near ground zero. Turns out Goldman's friends in high places consider it a small business too, although it made $5.6 billion in profits last year. As the fiscal cliff fiasco was playing out over New Year's Eve, faster than the ball dropped in Times Square, a deal was struck in Washington that will extend the subsidies for Goldman's fancy new headquarters in Lower Manhattan. In their 43 stories of glass and steel and a footprint 2 city blocks long, Goldman Sachs reigns supreme, thanks to a system rigged by and for the powerful rich. And then this. Just hours before the fiscal cliff deal's higher individual tax rates kicked in, Goldman handed Lloyd Blankfein and his top lieutenants a total of $65 million in restricted stock. Those were bonuses awarded a month earlier than usual so they could all beat the coming tax hike from which they have been spared for more than 10 lucrative years. It will not surprise you, I'm sure, to learn that corporations announced more special dividends last month than in any other December since at least 1955, doing everything they can to avoid helping pay off the debt that their CEOs have been urging Congress to cut. As for working people, tough luck. Because the fiscal cliff deal ends the cut in payroll taxes, the average worker this year will take home about $1,000 less.